Good night, everybody. My name is Alejandra del Ángel, and I will talk you a little bit about the Cold War, which was a military and political conflict between the Soviet Union and the US. The Cold War is the name given to the relationship that developed primarily between the USA and the Soviet Union after World War II, a clash of every different beliefs and ideology. Capitalism versus communism, each held with almost religious conviction, formed the basis of an international power struggle with both sides vying to dominance, exploring every opportunity for expansion anywhere in the world. For many, the growth of in weapons of mass destruction was the most worrying issue. The Cold War was to dominate international affairs for decades, and many major crises occurred. For example, the Cuban Missile Crisis, Vietnam, Hungary, and the Berlin Wall were just some of them. A lot of significant events in the Cold War, but the most important ones that I found were the creation of the Iron Curtain, the Marshall Plan, the Berlin Outfit, the forming of the NATO, the forming of the Warsaw Pact, the Vietnam War, the creation of the Berlin Wall, the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was one of the most highlighted ones, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the dissolution of the USSR, which marked the official end of the Cold War. And this war was characterized by the struggle between two major forces, one capitalism and the other one socialism. Capitalism is an economic system in which capital goods are owned by private individuals or business partners. The purest form of capitalism is free market or laissez-faire capitalism, in which private individuals are free to determine where to invest, what to produce or sell, and which prices to exchange goods and services. Most modern countries practice a highly regulated and mixed capitalist system. This, this economic system was created or impulsed by Adam Smith, and its most representative country is the United States. And we can also say that Mexico is one of the countries that manages a capitalist system. On the other hand, socialism is a populist economic and political system in which the means of production operate under public political ownership, sometimes called common ownership. Common ownership under socialism may take the shape through technocratic, oligarchic, totalitarian, democratic, or even voluntary rule. All legal production and distribution decisions are made by the ruling class. This initiative was impulsed, like in the utopic way, by Robert Owen and scientifically explained by Karl Marx, is one of the most recognized exponents of the socialism. We can say that the United Soviet Union was the most powerful socialist power in the world throughout history, but now we can say that countries like Cuba are trying to maintain a socialist system. Francisco del Ángel, better known as my father, likes to read a lot and investigate a lot about the history, so I thought that perhaps he might know something about the Cold War, so I decided to interview him. He is 45 years old, and here it is what he told me. He has a little basic English level, so I put subtitles so it was easy for everyone to understand what he was saying on the interview. And here it is. What countries were the world leaders during this period?
The Soviet Union and the US were world leaders from 1945 to 1989.
Why did countries who were allies during the war became enemies afterwards?
Between the two nations was a tense one. Americans were suspicious of Soviet communists and concerned about Stalin's way of ruling. The Soviets resent the Americans' decades-long refusal to treat them as an legitimate part of the international community, as well as their delayed entry into the World War II, which resulted in deaths of tens of millions of Russians. Cold War
Where did the Cold War take place?
wasn't a war that was directly and physically fought. It was more accurately a war that could have happened, but did not. The ideological warfare, however, involved the United States, Russia, Asia, Europe, and parts of Africa and Latin America, especially Cuba. The one place to Cold War manifested physicals was Korea. During in the Korea conflict from 1950 and 1953.
What opinion did the general public have of the Cold War?
The Cold War influenced popular culture throughout the belief that the communists were wrong or were unholy. Another cultural reflection of the Cold War was to create a sense of dualism where one side was correct, another was incorrect. Such a dualism benefits thus the position of power because it removes complexity and critical thought in the equation, forcing individuals to simply embrace what is being told in terms of whom or what defines the enemy.
What type of weapons did the two world powers have at their disposal?
Nuclear weapons basically. Everyone was concerned about the bombs and the effect of those possible attacks.
I think the Cold War was a necessary event for history process. I think countries were really affected by the World War, and there were some countries like US that felt like the most powerful thing in the world because they just defeated a enormous country like Germany. But the truth is that it was then true because a country like the Soviet Union was there to make a fight. And this war, if we can call it like that, really make two countries give the most of them for a long, long time. And it had several consequences that we can see today. For example, because of the Cold War, communism was almost completely disappeared from the world. Early in the Cold War, there were many communist countries in the world. All of Eastern Europe was communist. China and North Korea were communist. However, as time went by, the pressures of the Cold War destroyed communism in most places. Today, communism only exists in a few small countries, and some of these countries are only socialist considered because they say they are socialist. But in the practice, we can see that their economics work in a really capitalist way. Another thing is that, largely because of the Cold War, the communist countries built up their military power but neglected their civilian economies. The communist countries tried hard to keep up with the West in military terms, but were not strong enough economically to do that and still produced large quantities of quality consumer goods. Because of this, their economies were relatively weak and remain weak until this day. Almost all ex-communist countries are rather poor today, partly because of the effects of the Cold War. And we can see this example in Cuba, which is a communist slash socialist country. We can see that they're really a third world country with a lot of economical and political issues, perhaps because of these effects of the Cold War and, well, because of the crisis that happened in there. There are other effects that are not that pretty. Like, because of the Cold War, we have large arsenals of nuclear weapons in the US and the former Soviet Union. During the Cold War, the two superpowers engaged in an arms race, each trying to have enough nuclear weapons to destroy the other. Those arsenals still exist today, costing us money and causing us to worry that some of the nuclear material might fall into the hands of terrorists. What is going on here? We cannot have the same worries that people on 1991 had, because it's like now we are super extremely worried about where the duck are those missiles and how lethal are they for us. It is a really bad consequence of the Cold War that I'm really disappointed about. Another consequence is that in the United States the Cold War helped cause discord between liberals and conservatives. During the Cold War, and particularly during the Vietnam War, liberals and conservatives disagreed sharply over how aggressive the US should be in fighting communists abroad. Disputes over foreign policy helped bring about a situation in which conservatives thought liberals were un-American and liberals thought conservatives were imperialistic warmongers. This helped us to get to where we are today with a huge gulf between liberal and conservatives. In part because of the Cold War, the US became the world's only real superpower. The US was the unquestioned leader of the West during the Cold War. After it defeated the Soviet Union in the Cold War, it was left as a prominent power in the world, which still is today. This has meant that the US expects to have the influence all around the world, and people all around the world expect the US to help to solve their problems, which is not going to happen because the US have their own problems and their politics and economics are a mess. But we can still hope that they can find a little time for us, but I will not wait standing.